Nice. I have been accused in the past that my sermons are too much about love. And it's probably a fair accusation. It's what I think God is all about, what Jesus came to teach us. And for me, that's what the heart of the cross and the resurrection are all about, that Jesus died for us because Jesus loved us so much. But I want to make this point. God's love is different than human love. All of us have some warm and fuzzy images about love, about the best kind of love. And most of us have experienced love in various forms. The love I have for my 3 granddaughters right now is wonderful. And they love their nana and granddad, and they have lots of hugs and kisses, and they're healthy and beautiful and smart. Why is it that your own grandchildren are always the most beautiful and the smartest of all children? And it's a wonderful feeling to have that kind of love. Most of us who have been married or have had relationships know something about falling in love and those wonderful feelings of happiness and romantic and sexual love, and it's pretty awesome too. But Jesus' love goes beyond love that feels wonderful and great and is amazing. It's love also when things are not good, when things aren't wonderful, when you're not being loved back. Jesus' love is for everyone. And it's not just for us wonderful, good people who come to church and are upstanding and moral and wonderful, but it's for drug addicts, pushers, prostitutes, mafia, terrorists, corrupt politicians, atheists, drunks, people of every kind of religion, criminals, people who start wars, and people who beat their spouses and children, and all the people you are taught to avoid, and all those who you think are bound for hell. It's a different kind of love. It's an unconditional love that always loves no matter what. That's not always hard. That's hard for us to love sometimes in the same way. Imagine going to a public execution. They don't have them anymore. They got rid of them in Canada probably about 100 years ago. But they're executing an innocent man. And this innocent man has been tortured, and then this innocent man who's being tortured and being executed says, I love you and I forgive you. That's unconditional love. That's the love Jesus has for us. And it's dangerous and messy, hard to watch sometimes, and that kind of love got Jesus killed. A lot of us, and I include myself, we kind of dabble in real love, absolute unconditional love. We know how to love the people who love us. We know how to be good to people, but going all the way with unconditional love for everyone is hard. There are people here sitting in the pew today, maybe not very many of you, but there's probably 1 or 2 who've had a parent who was abusive or unkind, and you struggled to love that parent, and maybe that parent didn't even deserve love. It's hard to love someone who should have been a shepherd to you, but instead hurt you or beat you or shamed you or ignored you or bullied you. Maybe there's people here, all grown up, who have children that are grown up, and maybe a child has turned their back on you. And there's an empty hole and an aching heart in a parent whose child has gone prodigal, and you'd love to have that child return home and return to sanity and to relationship and love. It's hard to love a prodigal when they've turned their back on you. There are families here, maybe somebody's here, you have someone in the family who's an alcoholic or a drug addict, and it's hard to love someone with their lies, their excuses, their thefts, their broken promises, and their relapses. I've seen throughout my career thousands upon thousands of street people and homeless people or the unhoused. They have addiction problems, and they've burned all the bridges of their family because they have been so terrible with their lies and their thefts and things, and they've betrayed time and time again their families until they're cut off. At the same time, I don't want to be too hard on you. Some of you have loved people that don't deserve love, and you've loved unconditionally someone who's hurt you. And we don't often tell those stories in church. Sometimes we have trouble being completely honest and vulnerable, and for good reason, because we're not sure how people will take that. But when I think of the Good Shepherd, I'm thinking of this, not just this wonderful love that we have for our family and friends who love us back, but I'm thinking of that dangerous, difficult, messy, and demanding love. We have domesticated the idea of the Good Shepherd when we were looking at some of the hymns, some of the images that we've seen. You have the picture of the Good Shepherd and holding a beautiful lamb that looks like it just went to the spa. And we're all familiar with "The Lord is my shepherd." We sang it. One of the most familiar hymns maybe in the whole world. Sung to the tune of Crimond. West Bromwich Albion Football Club in England uses that as their anthem for their football club. My point is that we get used to the image of Jesus kind of as a Hallmark card with warm, wonderful feelings. But when it was originally presented and told by Jesus, it was a jarring image. He was portraying to the Pharisees and the crowds an image that they would have had trouble with. So let me set some context for this sermon on the Good Shepherd. I'm reading in the beginning, at the end of chapter 9 of John's Gospel, and then the first verse of chapter 10. Jesus said, "I came to this world to judge so that the blind should see and those who see should become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked him, "Surely you don't mean that we're blind too?" Jesus answered, "If you were blind, then you would not be guilty. But since you claim that you can see, this means that you're still guilty." Jesus said, "I am telling you the truth. The man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber." When you read the Bible, you see that chapter 9 ends with the story about the man born blind. And chapter 10 starts with the Good Shepherd. But if you read it as the gospel writer John wrote it, who wrote it without chapter and verse notations, it actually seamlessly flows. It's one big story, the story of the person born blind and the Good Shepherd are actually together. The Pharisees are upset with Jesus, who's healed the blind man, and Jesus goes right on to talk about their blindness and saying that they're bad shepherds. That's the connection. We didn't add the verses to the Gospels till 1,500 years after they were written. They were added to make it easier to follow along. It is easier to follow along if you got chapters and verse. It's easy, go to chapter 10, verse whatever. But the original Gospels had no chapters and no verses. It just flowed like that. Sometimes not even periods. I mean, they didn't have periods for sentences, and that creates other issues for translations. But the conflict with the Pharisees and their blindness is one long story with the Good Shepherd, because it's about the Pharisees who are blind and their bad leadership as shepherds of the people. So the Good Shepherd passage, which we often think of as this warm, comforting passage, and there's a side of it. I'm not trying to say that it's not comforting to know about the Good Shepherd, but it was more jarring when it was first told. And it was disturbing not only in the sense that it was really critical of the leadership of Israel. But there's another disturbing aspect to it here. Now, I know that in Alberta we're probably more used to cattle than we are to sheep. But around the world, sheep are a pretty common animal, and they have a wide range of uses. They're valuable for meat, for wool, for skin. You can use their manure for fertilizer. You can drink sheep milk. Sheep can be used as pack animals. They were very useful creatures. They eat a wide range of plants, including weeds. They do well in arid and semi-arid countries, and they can graze land that's not suitable for raising crops. They're flock animals. Their instinct to stay in herds makes it easier to move them around than certainly other animals, and it's a little easier to deal with sheep than a 2,000-pound bull if you're trying to move them around. And they're also very hardy. Their wool makes them really tough in terms of weather conditions. There were lots of sheep in Israel. Some of you read the Bible, and most of you know the stories of the Bible. The Hebrews had lots of roots in their sheep. Moses, when he ran away from Egypt, ended up as a shepherd for years, and it's while he was shepherding that God called to him from the burning bush. We've mentioned King David was a shepherd as a boy, and supposedly that's where he learned to use his sling to protect the sheep from predators. And in the Old Testament, the idea of a king being a good shepherd was in the scriptures, but also was the idea from Ezekiel that many of the leaders of Israel were bad shepherds, greedy, self-serving. When Jesus came along, hundreds and hundreds of years after King David, shepherding had changed a lot. Shepherding was now primarily an industry owned by rich foreigners, not by local indigenous farmers. They were owned by the mega rich, and shepherds were hired hands. The religious requirements of Jews for cleanliness, especially as the Pharisees practiced them, meant that dirty shepherds were unfit for worship. The conventional wisdom when I was a child in England was if you did some bad stuff and you needed to get away, you went to France and joined the French Foreign Legion, who asked no questions about who you were and what your background was, whether you'd done crimes or whatever. They gave you a new name for anonymity, and as long as you were willing to fight for the French Foreign Legion, you went off to Africa or someplace and fought for the French Foreign Legion. But in Jesus' day, if you got into trouble and you wanted to drop out of society, you became a shepherd. Shepherds were kind of considered the lowlifes in Jesus' day. Not wonderful, loving, caring people, but people who got into trouble, people who had difficulties finding a job, so they took kind of the best they could get, and you were out looking after the sheep. Uneducated, crude, dirty, and of dubious character. Those were the shepherds. They were almost as low as you could go for being a Jew, almost as dirty as a Gentile. So for Jesus to call himself a shepherd in that day was disturbing, off-putting. People did not think of shepherds as wonderful, loving, caring people. They thought of shepherds as people who really didn't care about the sheep. They're just doing it because, it's a job, and it's not much of a job either. And then Jesus uses this image to contrast himself with bad shepherds, thieves and robbers even, hired hands who don't care for the sheep, which he calls basically the current leaders of Israel. People who don't use the gate of love, people who are only hired hands, people who don't care for the sheep, people who are only in it for a buck, people who run away at the sign of trouble or a wolf and let the sheep die. People who raise the sheep only to sacrifice them for their own ends. Jesus was really disturbing their reality. See, what really counts is love, care. What really counts is unconditional love. What really counts is a shepherd would give up his life for the sheep. I think some people would have thought of Jesus as a stupid shepherd, because in real life, shepherds don't give up their life for the sheep. When I was writing this, I thought a story of a couple of years ago, when a man, a 55-year-old man, fell through the ice in Edmonton in the wintertime trying to rescue a dog that was trapped on the ice. And my heart at the time when I heard that story went out not only to the family for their loss, but as a dog lover myself, someone risking their life for a dog was, very touching, but I would not want someone to lose their life to save my dog. Their life, to me, would be more important. And the analogy would be something the same. Shepherds in real life would not give their life in exchange for a sheep. You wouldn't stand there and let the cougar kill you to save a sheep. You'd let the sheep die and you'd save yourself. So it's not a cuddly metaphor, is it? But it is a metaphor about the extent that God has gone to save you. It's like a human giving his life for a dumb old sheep. It's like a man going out on the North Saskatchewan giving his life for a dog. It's outrageous and preposterous, but just see how far God will go for you. And this shepherd doesn't even care who the sheep is. The good sheep, the bad sheep, the black sheep, the white sheep, the old sheep, the young sheep, the ewes, the ram. The shepherd cares for all of them and gives his life for everyone. John says in his first letter, "We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another." If Jesus laid down his life for us, John invites us to go deeper into love. Plunge unconditionally into this love thing where we love people no matter what, and practice outrageous, preposterous grace, laying down our lives for others. Jesus invites us to be shepherds like Jesus. It's easier to be a hired hand. It's easier to do things for others when there's some reward, some personal gain. I scratch the sheep's back, the sheep scratches mine. Or if the sheep crosses my palm with silver, you get what I'm saying. And many of our interactions, our loving interactions, have that sense that when we love someone, we get love back. But to be a shepherd in the sense of Jesus is much more difficult. And then Jesus goes on to say something even more outrageous in some ways. I have sheep that are not of this fold. I have sheep that are not Presbyterian. I have sheep that are not Christian. I have sheep that are not heterosexual. I have sheep that don't identify with any particular gender. I have sheep that have no home and live on the streets. I have sheep that have a different skin color, and sheep who have a different culture, and sheep who have a different religion, and sheep who have no religion, and sheep who have no money, and sheep who've done really bad things, and sheep who nobody wants, and sheep who are in jail, and sheep who should be in jail. And I love them all. Loving is messy and hard and demanding. And Jesus has a lot of criticism. It is not that the leaders of Israel did not love. It is not that the leaders of Israel did not believe in God. But they didn't practice unconditional love. They had a very strict idea who was welcome in the kingdom of God. And they kept out all the riffraff, all the people who didn't deserve it according to them. But Jesus opens the gate to everyone. Those leaders did it, though, because they didn't love all the sheep. They used the sheep. They hit the sheep. They abused the sheep. They taxed the sheep, and they got rich off the sheep. They even sacrificed the sheep to God, thinking that if we sacrifice the sheep's blood, it'll make us right with God. God doesn't need the blood of bulls or sheep or anything else. God proved that on the cross. You can kill Jesus and I will still love. And it brings me back to something else. So how do we change the system where those who are supposed to shepherd the people hurt the people? How do we change a racist and a discriminatory society where a human shepherd who's supposed to protect and serve puts his knee on the neck of someone whose skin color is different and squeeze the life out of him because he's poor or skin is different? Or, how do we change that? And I say this cautiously and hesitantly as a white male and I guess a white shepherd, but how do we actually love those and care for those who are part of the system who's perpetuated discrimination? There are sheep who are lost, who are oppressed and hungry, and those who suffer injustice. But there are sheep who are lost, who are the oppressors, the ones who practice violence, the ones who exclude, the ones who hurt the sheep, the ones in power who like the system the way it is. And it's not just about loving the oppressed and those who are being discriminated against, but how do we love those who are the discriminators and the oppressors so that we can change the system and that we can transform them? How to bring the fold into one fold where there's justice and love for all. There's no easy answers. There's no quick fixes, no surefire success methods. And it's certainly not by letting people get away with injustice. But part of the answer is the truth. Part of the answer is sharing personal stories, truly listening to one another and each other's pain, and practicing justice and practicing care and practicing unconditional love for everyone. When I look at my life, there's times I've been a good sheep, and there's times I've been a bad sheep. There's times I've been a sheep that's wandered away. There's times I've been a thief and a robber. Sometimes I've been a bad shepherd. Sometimes I've been a wolf. Sometimes I've been a lamb. And sometimes I've even been a good shepherd. And through it all, Jesus has loved me and understood me and cared for me and been there for me and forgiven me and changed me. And I think that's the kind of shepherd we'd all like to be to each other.